part of it, a fundraiser effort for, I think, the filmmaker Cinematheque, something like that. And a guy named John Brockman came to me, and Klaus and Bob Rauschenberg at the same time, and said, would you like to do a piece for this evening? And the other two guys are going to do a piece. And I guess he went to the other two guys and said the same thing. This is what he told me anyway. And then he went, you know, and so on. So everybody agreed, and I guess part of the reason you, not only do you want to work, but you want to work in the context with guys whose work you respect as much as you do, because you know they're going to be there, and you're going to have the best audience you could have. So that was how that got agreed to. And going into that first theater and being all dark and crinkly, I thought it was like being inside of a prune. And I suppose, you know, there are probably some other metaphorical meanings, but that's, you know, that's it. But you know, titles have a way of expanding throughout the piece, and the title's always appropriate, and it's always important. Well, usually very important, and they do acquire, if they have any sense, you know, they become a metaphor, a part of the metaphor, part of the image of the piece. So I think in that way, it goes a little beyond what I just said, you know. This is kind of an obvious example of something that I think, and that is a lot of the content of work is about the work. And about making, subplot is about making the work. So in this case, it's like a framework sometimes for telling the story, you know. So in this case, film. Now I always go back to what I think are very important theatrical precedents. I call them theatrical precedents that have been overlooked, you know, like clowns and like spectacles and things like that, where the spaces may not have been a conventional space. Normally I like to either architect a space specifically for a piece that is within the sort of image of the piece, using the space and the way the space changes as part of the vocabulary of the piece, so that you know, space is as evocative as anything else. So in this case, I luckily, in a way, since I had no proscenium stage experience, I could treat that as a kind of a found space or film space. So, which is what I decided to, or it's what I did. I don't know if I made any decision about it or not. I just said fine. And since I'm not meaning to be devious about things, that's one of the reasons why it starts with a shot of the projector. So, okay. Clue. And also part of the reason why I leave in the things like the sprocket holes and the open frames and stuff. But the other thing too is the camera's always there, and you have to be conscious of the fact when you're watching these things, and I was aware of this at the time, I know this was in my mind at the time, that, and one of the other reasons for the open frames and the sprocket holes and all that other stuff is that people have to be aware that besides what they're seeing in the shot, there's a bunch of people behind the camera, you know, doing stuff to make all this stuff happen. Even in my tiny, low-budget operations, you know, there's a couple other people there throwing feathers or moving lights or doing other stuff or spraying paint or whatever it is. You know, there's got to be somebody there doing this stuff. So, and also that's another reason why I was careful not to let the technique go beyond the crude, you know. You know, I don't want any questions of like, how'd they do that? You know, you got to see how they do that. You know, the flowers changing the color at the end. It's pretty obvious that it's cans of spray paint changing the color, not sophisticated lighting or color manipulation at the lab or any of that stuff. It's spray paint. I don't write things down. I don't score things out ahead of time. I like to plan. I like to plan the piece and have it develop and grow out of the process of its being made. But in this case, I think, probably because film is such a hard and fast, rigid thing, once you cut the film and do that, it's hard to change it. I mean, for me. So when I recently looked at some notes from '65 that I had made, I was surprised to see like a shot list down to the frame and second of each image and the whole thing, and I'm amazed. Well, I realized they had to be somewhat coordinated because of the way the action of the one film goes against the other one. It wasn't essential that the two things match up perfectly all the time. But I always counted on a couple of times that the performer would match up precisely with the image. I mean, no matter how casual the performer might be in that case, although I had always the best, I have to say. Well, the first one was Mimi Stark, and then I can go on and on but I can't even remember all the people who did it. Barbara Lloyd did it. Debbie Hay did it. I mean, just others over time. But when they matched up at those moments with the image, there was a kind of a bursting into a kind of super reality or supernality that was kind of neat, and it was almost shocking. In the beginning, I thought, well, okay, what I'll do, which shows you there was some more planning than I'm used to doing. What I'll do is I will hold up something in front of the camera when I'm taking these things exactly where I want that figure to be. And you can see the thing you can see the shadow of the thing, and then I said, okay, fine, that's a bad idea, because that's going to require a more locked-in situation than I'm going to want to be in. I'm going to want to work with that, and so, but I'm not going to take that out and do that, because somebody's got to know there's a decision there, and I want that in there about the making of the piece. It seemed natural to use a person as a surface or something like that. And also the idea of the flatness, kind of flattening out the people on the stage. If you look at the other people on the stage, they're very flat when they reflect the image, of the film. And also when the jungle stuff is there and other stuff, they're kind of flat, and I always had the feeling they look kind of like those children's books from antique times, those Jolly Jump-Up books. Nobody will know what they are anymore. When you open the page and little characters come up. People sort of always imagine that flat screen as being some kind of entry into a space. And it's not. It's a flat screen with an image being projected on it. It's a moving picture. So you can... it's nice to use that, that rhythm as part of the piece. Rhythm and pace. That's where it goes off the wall, because then you can change the composition of that stuff and make it completely different, but you can do it in a way that nobody notices.
How did you?
Well, you can just compose it like a piece of music, and people don't understand that. Visually, they don't understand it. They just say, "Oh, this has taken a long time." A large part of the first performances were done at silent speed. because in those days you had a projector that could move from sound to silent and silent to sound, and I switched the projector so that the first part of the piece was always in silent speed. Now I don't know what difference that made. It made the piece a little longer, changed the timing in the beginning somewhat, and probably the silent speed part went right up to the time when the movie person comes out. Yeah, the person in the projector puts a little mask in front, and they are a very important part of the performance. You know, a performer. The projectionist is a performer. Generally, we use that word to describe the person who is on the stage being seen, but basically I never thought of people as quite like that. I think they're producers of an image. The key parts of the story, we'll just go for the key parts, is that rending of the fruit basically is letting out the eggs or the seeds or whatever you want to call it. And then there's something about the light bulb and that whole sequence and that whole business of the lights, the changing of the lights and the quality of the light, the real light as opposed to the fake light, and the fake light, the pseudo light, real light, movie light. And using the bulb, which is the same. That's almost has this. Well, the one that I used in the original had a similar shape to the fruits, and it had the same content in a way, but that's the light escaping. And then the final part with the flower changing the color. And at some points it's almost dark, and so it's like little stars up there. I don't know if you need much more of a story than that in a piece. And already that's a little literary for me, I think. So I just assume that in the end, your language is going to be clear. Now sometimes, when I'm doing what I do, since I'm always limited in rehearsal time and working time, I'm always taking a great risk in having a disaster because there's no time. It's really not. It's not really the best way to work, but at the same time, you may be in a situation where you can precipitate something unexpected happening, and that's fun. If there's anything to understand in the work, then it means it's not a mystery, and I don't know, that makes it that interesting. I'd rather have something beyond my understanding. I'd rather have a work that I see be a complete wonder. I want to be awestruck by the damn thing, and there's nothing to be understood about that. I mean, if you have that moment of being struck dumb, I think. I used to think that if you have an art, at that instant, you have an art. It's okay to die, because that's a nice place to be at the end, because then you know what it's all about for that moment when you're awestruck.